Eddie, I'm not sure I love the idea of you driving.
Oh, I'm starting to sucker. Harrington's got her. Don't you, big boy?
Hello, and welcome back to a special bonus episode of Skull Rock Broadcast, our Stranger Things podcast. This is Megan, and you may have noticed that our secret segment, if you are a regular listener to that segment, was a little bit short last week. And you may remember that there was not supposed to be an episode today. So, for a few different reasons, mostly because I was falling asleep at my computer editing last Thursday, I decided to take out the longer segment that we recorded of our first Steady Fix that we ever read. So, this that you are about to get to listen to is a special segment that Stacy and I recorded a few weeks ago, and I am really excited for you to hear it. So, here it is. So, we decided to kind of take it back, right?
We're dialing it back.
So, season 4, volume 2 came out in July.
Mm-hmm.
I had never read fan fiction before.
Mm-hmm.
I watched season 4 times at least, like on a loop for like the whole month of July into August.
Yeah.
And then I needed another outlet, and I was like thinking maybe in a Facebook group, and people started talking about fan fiction, and some people, and I was already totally into the idea of Steady because
Yes.
I don't want to like go on and on about the timeline of everything too much, but I looked back, and the first thing that I ever posted was like a meme like mid-July, and it was like the meme where it was Dustin, appropriate for our episode today. It was like, these are Dustin's divorced dads, you know, like changing custody, you know, like at Skull Rock. That was like the meme that people made.
Yep. I know what you're
So,
talking about.
I was like, yeah, they are Dustin's divorced dads. And then I
Mhm.
started seeing fan art. And of course, the
Ugh.
first fan art that really like got me for Steady was Littlest Star Fighter. Their art, it was starting to
Ooh.
get like shared around. And I was just like, okay, yep, I'm sold. Like,
Yeah. I have found my people.
yes, that was in the beginning of August. And so by the middle of August, I was like, let me see about this whole fan fiction thing. And for like a month, I was just like in a hole. Like, and I told Stacey earlier, it was kind of hard for me to find like the first 5. So I went with like the first 5 like longer fics that I
Yeah.
read because I was reading just so many one-shots. Like I would sit down
Mhm.
for a couple hours and read like 10 one-shots because there
Oh,
were
yeah.
so many like fun short ones. And I mean all sorts of stuff like smutty stuff, fluffy stuff, like
Mhm.
I it was just like an education in fan fiction.
It really was, man.
Hold on, I said I would shout out a couple of authors. Cherry Cola Tree,
Mhm.
Chronic Rabbit,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Area 50 Done. They had
Mhm.
some really good smutty one-shots.
Ooh, I'll have to look them up.
96 Tears
Mhm.
for some good, like fluffy type stuff.
Nice.
Oh, and of course, Adore, our
Yes.
favorite, which
Yep.
real quick while I'm thinking of it, I mentioned that they were doing one of those auctions for Fandom Trumps Hate
Yes.
because I saw VO and like my brain just went Adore because they're VO. Like,
Mhm.
but apparently there's other VOs in the world.
Oh, okay.
And so that was actually not them. But luckily, I don't think anybody kind of like went and bid on them in like the 8 hours that bidding was still open after our podcast dropped.
True, yeah.
Because But I did want to like do a little redaction there and apologize for misspeaking because that was a different Adore or a different VO offering that fic for the auction. But they were definitely one of my early ones because they have a few longer stories, but I definitely dove into some of their like
Yes.
one shots first. One of my favorites is that Backseat Afterglow.
Oh my God. Great one. Great one.
Yeah, there was just so many. So those are some of the kind of like early stuff. So tell me a little bit about how you first got into the fan fiction.
Well, to be completely honest, in season 3, I originally was like, Billy and Steve are kind of hot together, which that's Herring Grove, I believe. Instead of archive, I discovered fan fiction. And I read a few good stories on there, but like it was just once in a blue moon. It really didn't interest me. And I was actually here dog sitting for a few days. And I was bored out of my mind. And much like you, I was like, there has to be more. There has to be. And somebody recommended archive to me. And I went down the rabbit hole, as I did with lots and lots of artwork, little ST Fighter, Starfighter, obliviated art. Right away, I was like, these people get it. And I started reading it, much like you, few, one shots, but I just had so much time because I have the summers off that I just sat down the first night that I found archive. And this was just like mere days after. And I was so upset that Eddie was dead that I was like, there has to be a story that fixed this. There has to be. And I found several that were fix it fix where, Eddie lives. And I just were like looking back, I was reading stories that were like 30, 40 chapters long, and I still do that. But I just went down the rabbit hole and I was like, these two are so perfect together. And I'd never shipped really people before, but these two characters, I was like, this works so, so well. So yeah, I just became obsessed.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So we're excited to share with you some of
hmm
our first 5 big fics that we read. So tell me what you picked for your first one.
So my first one was Slow and Steady,
Mm.
Steady, um, by Chella 98. And
Okay.
it takes place after the events of season 4. And Steve one night can't sleep, so he goes out to the quarry to have a cigarette, and he runs into Eddie. And both of them kind of like agree that they have shared trauma and they're having a hard time sleeping. And very slowly they start to fall for each other. And next thing you know, Steve has his bisexual awakening. And when the smut hits, and it's fantastic. And it
Nice.
also shows Robin and Nancy falling for each other. So it's these two
Oh,
couples
good. Yeah.
together. It's just so sweetly written. And that was actually the first story I believe I shared with Brandy, because she had never really read any fan fiction before. So I was like, check out this website called Archive. It'll be worth your while. I was being like a street peddler, but so, so good. But I highly recommend that one.
Nice.
What about you?
So one of my first ones, which actually I'll just talk about this first because it
Mhm.
was my first one. And I've mentioned it before. It's O Stars, one of our faves.
Ugh.
The Man That I Could Be. It was, I just like remember reading the first few chapters and being like, I'm never going to recover from this.
Nope.
And I mean, here we are. I
Here
have
we
not
are. Yep.
recovered, but I was just hooked. Like, like you said, I needed that fix it. I needed
hmm
Eddie to be alive. It was a cool, like, they meet before season 4.
Yes.
So I haven't read a ton of these, but the first couple I read were like, you retold season 4 with the Steve and Eddie relationship,
Mm.
which is really cool. Like, to kind of like think about the events of season 4 in a little bit of a different way. And because I was constantly rewatching season 4, so I was still in that mindset, but
Yeah.
then I had that extra element of these 2 guys being together and all this angsty stuff, like
Mm.
Steve goes through some stuff. So it's like him working through it, Eddie kind of reconnecting with Eddie. chef's kiss, like you
Oh,
say, that it also continues like post season 4,
yes.
everything gets fixed, but also like there's a lot to kind of recover from. And there's so many, all of the other characters from the party. There's like really cool moments with Will. I love Stephen Robin's relationship in this fic because it was like, I mean, the first one I've read, but like that whole codependent Stephen Robin, like they like are sleeping together because like in the bed together because they can't be apart. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like I've talked so much about this fic and I will always love it, but that was the first long steady fic that I started and that really just like hooked me. So,
So well written.
and along with that, because it took me a while to get through it, one, because it's so long, it was one
Hmm.
of the longest ones to exist for a while there. And then two, when I got through the part that was already released, I didn't even realize because I didn't know this about fan fiction that it wasn't finished and that it was
Yep.
continually being updated. So it was like I finished what was already out there in the world, but it
Hmm.
wasn't done yet. So like the last like maybe third of it, I think there's 26 chapters. So I think that maybe
Wow.
like 18 were out already when I first
Hmm.
read it. So I was like then continuing to follow it as a whip for like the
Yep.
last 6 to 8 chapters.
It's
So
like a soap
and
opera. Yeah.
yeah, and that was a cool experience. And I don't do it for a lot of fics, but I do enjoy it once in a while. I know we liked following Sneaky Link like that.
Yes.
And so I was reading lots of other fics at the same time as this
Hmm.
fic, but it was definitely what I would say is my first. Broke my fan fiction virginity.
Yep. That was it. What a way to lose it, man. Yeah, that one was one that I ended up like reading probably around September or October 2022. So I didn't count it as one of my first ones, but I'm really glad you mentioned it because I've fallen in love with that author's work. So,
Yeah,
so good.
yeah,
And man, it takes a lot to make me like kind of choke up reading a fic. That one did it. So, whew.
yep.
But speaking of Sneaky Link, my first exposure to the genius, otherwise known as Morning Berries, was a fantastic fic called Sweet Surrender. And
Okay.
oh my God, it's another fix it fic where Eddie basically is paid off by the government. They're like, well, you need to move away, you need to change your name, yada, yada, yada. So he does. And then it's X amount of years later, he runs into Steve at a gay club and let's just say he decides to visit like the kids and stuff like for a week. And he slowly starts to realize that he has feelings for Steve, and Steve feels the same way. And there is a staircase scene that I will never shut up about for the rest of my life,
Oh
as
my
well.
gosh.
Oh my God, dude. Oh my God. And as well as a drive drive-in. I always say drive-through, which I'm like, "Oh, dear God."
Uh-huh,
A
uh-huh.
drive-in scene that I'm just like, "Holy effing shit." And there's just a great moment with Robin kinda calling Eddie out on her bullshit, and it's, like, borderline scary, but it's so well written, and this was my first exposure to Morning Berries, and I was like, "Wow," and there's nothing better than finding an author that just writes your favorite characters so well. So that was my first time ever reading their work. Woo!
Nice. I definitely still need to read that one too. Okay, so the next one that I was going to talk about, which I mentioned Chronic Rabbit when I was saying
Yes.
before about some of the one shots because they did Mice Under the Bleachers, which is super
Oh,
hot.
yeah.
Anything Goes in the Winnebago. I
Oh
was
my
like,
god.
ah.
Yep.
But a longer fic that they did is called The Edification of Steve Harrington. And I
Mhm.
don't remember all of the details of some of these fics, but for a while I was doing a really good job like writing like little blurbs in my notes app about them.
Yeah.
I definitely don't still do that, but it has Steve and Eddie. I'm Steve watching Eddie play D&D. They talk about Steve reading Lord of the Rings to Eddie while he waits for him to wake up. Eddie is kind of like recovering in Owen's lab with Max and
Hmm.
reading to her. So there's kind of like lots of like fun vibes in this story. They accidentally like cuddle with each other. It gets
Oh,
hot in the shower. Like it
hell
has
yeah.
like all the best stuff. And then it ends really well. And I don't want to like spoil it, but I'll just say roommates.
Oh, hell yeah.
So it's a shorter, it's I think 8 chapters, and 8 was like Eddie's POV that's added at the
Hmm.
end because the majority of it is Steve's POV. But
Yeah.
I just remember really loving that one, and I love how that author writes smut because
Oh,
it's just like, oh,
hell yeah.
so
Yeah.
good.
You need a fan. Yep.
Yes, yes. So what's your next one?
My next one is one of the longer ones I remember first reading, The Babysitter and the Freak. And that's
Mm.
by The Crickets Are Calling. And it's another fix it fic. And it was the first time I had ever read that the way they were able to say that he was, Steve gives him CPR, which in my head, I'm like, that would have happened. And it's him recovering at Steve's house, I believe. And it shows them slowly falling for each other. And you discover that Eddie has a heart condition. And that's why he has to be watched so closely. And there's just this really cute thing. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it does show quite a lot of their life. And there's this cute thing that whenever Steve's having a panic attack, Eddie taps SOS on his chest. So it's like a way he goes, whenever you're feeling anxious and I'm not around, tap SOS on your heart and I'll be there, which I was like, ah. But it actually reminded me a lot of Take the Money and Run because it does flash forward into the future a little bit and
Mhm,
Robin helps him out, if you get my drift. And it's
mhm.
just really cute to see them actually have a happy ending.
Yeah.
So it was one of my first like longer, like that one's like 30 plus chapters, but it was just really cute to see, Steve actually, he saved Eddie. Yay. So that one was definitely a cute one. What about you?
So my next one was one of my still, like, favorites as well, and it's another one that I read kind of right on the heels of finishing what was then released of The Man That I Could Be, and it's called Don't Go Home Without Me.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
The authors were Ashravale and Calvar,
Hmm.
and it was 21 chapters. It is dual POV, so you get both of their points of view,
Cool.
and it's a soulmate AU.
Oh, okay.
So
Yep.
the gist of this fic is that your soulmate's last words to you are tattooed on your wrist in their handwriting.
I like it.
It's kind of like starts when they were kids and kind of
Okay.
like one of them knows that the other one is his soulmate. I don't think
Hmm.
that they both realize that,
Yeah.
but then they know each other just from school, and then the events of season 4 also happen. So it
Hmm.
slightly diverges from, like, what happens in canon. Like, the other one that you were talking about, there's a strong, like, Nancy Robbins subplot, which I
Nice.
liked. They have, like, actually a couple extra chapters dedicated just to them.
That's awesome.
Super slow burn, epic fix it, really creative, like, elements of, like, what could happen, like, after season 4 to, like,
Hmm.
fix everything. Got some Jargile in there.
Oh, love that. Love that.
Yeah. And then it's a nice ending. It's not like a whole everything's wrapped up perfectly
Hmm.
ending, but it's very beautiful.
Oh.
So that was another one that I absolutely loved and like stuck with me. Like
Hmm.
kind of like still can kind of like feel how I was feeling when I read it.
I'm telling you, like, literally, you just summed up my next choice perfectly because it was technically the very first one I ever read. And it's from an
Okay.
author called Out of My Gourd. And they made Keep It Steady Eddie,
Yep.
Guitar Search Romance. There's a camp one. And then the one that I picked was Not So Bad, which
That's the
is,
next one on my list too.
oh my God, we're both gonna have to dish. It like
Yeah.
those were I found their page first, and right away I was like, oh my God, they write them so well. And, not smutty, but just the slow burn of them falling in love. And not so bad as in Steve's point of view, and keep it steady Eddie is in Eddie's point of view,
Mhm.
but not so bad is Steve falling for Eddie. And there's like a great scene of him like admitting that he's never really smoked weed before, which I love that the author was like, I totally forgot about him admitting he smokes marijuana to Dustin when he thinks it's his dad.
Yeah.
But it's just such a cute scene of him there, and like Argyle and Jonathan are there, and then there's a scene where they go to a carnival together, and just like such subtle things as Eddie putting his arm around Steve when they're watching a movie, and like his thumb is like rubbing circles into his arm, and Steve is literally all of us, like just fangirling. So love, love, love that author. Love that story.
Not so bad. So
Oh,
good. I also loved that fic. I think it is so lighthearted. Like,
mm,
there's not really any angst. There's not really any smut, but it's just like so loving and sweet and fun. Like, it's cathartic after
yeah.
like a very, deep season and a very
Mm,
some really deep, like, other fics that I'd read, so I have still not read Keep It Steady, Eddie, which it's funny, I put, like, a little poll in my stories today of, like, what everybody's, first fics that they ever read were, and a
was that a big
lot
one?
a lot of people were saying Keep It Steady, Eddie, because I think that was, like, a really, like, early one.
Yeah.
Some people were saying, like, they couldn't remember if it was Keep It Steady, Eddie or Not So Bad.
Mhm.
I can go through a couple more what people said after we
Yeah.
finished up, but I like how Not So Bad has kind of, like, Robin and Vicky, like, I
Yep.
I know we love Robin and Nancy, but, like, it's fun to see some
Yeah.
authors write Robin and Vicky also, and that's something we might get in canon, so that's
Mhm.
kind of nice. I like that Eddie and Steve are helping Mike with some
Yes.
things in that one.
Yep.
That was nice. It's just, like, very like a summer vibe, very romantic.
Mhm.
Yeah, really fun.
So, my last one is a classic, and I did discover it a little later, but it was one that I was completely floored over, and that was Your Divine. I have never read a fan fiction written so beautifully before. Just magic with words. And I'd read a lot, and Out of My Gourd even did a cast fic. I read a lot
Mm.
where, Eddie does come back as a vampire. I've read one where even the bats had something to do with that, and Steve ends up turning into one. But Your Divine was the first time I had read a story where the chapters were so long but so detailed. I felt like I was reading a novel. And, not only was it beautifully written, but from the very beginning, something as simple as, Steve trying to show Eddie, to take a bath and the depression and limbo he's been in since he wasn't able to save him. And, how Eddie originally is kind of almost like a feral animal. And then it shows them falling in love and, him transforming into Cass, during the full moon and the smut. Woo! And the cute little nicknames they have for each other. And then, some bad stuff returning. And there's some really like heavy, heartbreaking scenes. But it was one of the most romantic reads I've ever read. And I have devoured quite a lot of their work since then. And as much as I love it all, Your Divine always holds a special place in my heart because it was so beautifully written. And I know they just recently did a POV of Steve's character, I believe.
So, I love Your Divine also. I
Mhm.
did not include it in my list just because, like you, I've read it a little later. I don't think I started until, like, late October, and then it took me a
Yeah.
couple months to, like, get through it because I didn't read it all in one go. But
Mhm.
they, I believe, just started releasing the story, but from Little Bit's perspective,
Ooh, okay.
I think.
I like that.
So, you know how that's kind of like the monster version of Eddie, like the monster that's living inside of Eddie. I don't know if that's a
Mm.
spoiler. Um, but I like that, like, in that fic, it's kind of interesting that there's sort of 3 people. There's
Yep.
3 entities kind of like in that relationship, which is unique and really
hmm
kind of powerful sometimes. Yeah, so my last one was one of my, again, very first ones that I read, and it was not a super long one, but it's called We're Never Done with Killing Time.
Oh, I never
The
heard of it.
author is Ruffaloon.
Mm-hmm.
Steve has a graduation party for Eddie. That's like the first chapter. Then the
Oh.
second chapter, they watch a movie in Eddie's trailer. So there is some smut.
Ooh.
It was like a continuation of season 4. Season 4 had a happy ending. The characters are so like energetic and well written. It like made me so happy to read. Like I wrote down that I couldn't stop smiling and laughed out loud so many times.
I love stories like that. What's the name of it again?
We're never done with killing time.
We're never done with killing time. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
So super good chemistry, really great dialogue. There was like only 2 or 3 chapters written at the time, and
hmm
then there are now 4 chapters, but I can't remember like exactly when the other chapters came out.
Yeah.
And I really don't know if I remember the last chapter. So I'm due for like a
Ooh.
reread of that one
I'm writing it down right now.
to like kind of read it all at once, all at one time, because
Yeah.
there was like a few months break between like the other chapters. So,
hmm
but it was fun that they kept like adding on to it.
I'm
So,
intrigued.
yeah, it was a really good one.
Wow, we picked some classics, man.
Family video vibes in there,
Ooh.
like yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So, that was a really fun one, and yeah, it was super fun to talk about, like, some of our first fics. Let me just go real quick and shout out a couple more.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of people saying, "Keep it steady, Eddie." Some "You're Divine."
hmm
Um, Dustin's Dads. I have not read that one,
Hmm.
but I think I would love it.
Yeah.
Whole Lotta Love by Stereobone. I have not read that one.
no.
So I'm wanna read this one because this person said it's a story by Annie by Banani, which I have read a couple of their fics that have been made into podfics, but
Okay.
2 of the ones that I've listened to are, like, some of my favorite podfics.
Oh.
So I don't think I've read this one. It's called Leave the Light On Sometimes All Night, but I'm going to read that one and maybe try to, like, read some more of that author's fics because
Yeah.
I love them. The most remarkable thing about
Yeah.
You Standing in the Doorway is that it's
So good.
you. Such a good one.
hmm
Are You Flagging?
Oh, classic.
Still have not read, but definitely a classic.
hmm
Another person said The Most Remarkable Thing, The Man That I Could Be. Let's see. Oh, Lethargic Waste and Out of My Gourd apparently wrote a fic called You Make Me Feel Like I'm Breathing,
That's the
which,
cast one.
okay, that's what I was wondering.
hmm
Flight Risk, that was a more recent one, but
I
good
still got to
one.
read that one. I heard that's
Yeah.
excellent.
And then Money, Power, Glory, I started that one and I still haven't finished it, but it's really good.
Ooh.
And that was like another early one that a lot of people were into. So,
hmm
yeah, I think those are definitely some classics.
I love it. I love it. Great suggestions, guys. There were some that I hadn't even heard of, so I can't wait to dig on in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, this was so fun to talk about. I love like reminiscing about this,
Mm,
and I can't believe we're at like coming up on 2 years. Like
crazy.
crazy, 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 crazy. But still have lots of time to enjoy all of our favorite fics before
Hell
season
yeah.
5. I feel weird about
Me
season
too.
5 because we kind of like we've decided what happens after
Oh, yeah.
season 4.
Yep. Exactly.
Like,
hmm
it's 2 separate parts of my brain because,
Yeah.
like, part of my brain, like the first part of this podcast, so into what's gonna happen in season 5, wanna know all the backstory, and then the
Yeah.
other part of my brain is, like, the fan fiction, I don't care what happens
Yeah.
in season 5.
I've already read it. It's fine, man. Yep. Same. Samesies.
So, it's kind of fun because, I don't know, keeps me sane a little bit, like,
Exactly.
I don't have to go too far in one direction or the other. Stay balanced. And And that's it for today. We really hope that you enjoyed that conversation. We had so much fun recording it. And we will be back at you next Friday. Talk to you soon. Over and out.